We are here today to talk about an issue of huge consequence to the American people, an issue that, in my view, does not get the kind of attention that it deserves. And that is the fact that the American people today are paying by far the highest prices in the world for the prescription drugs that they need. When we talk about health care, we are talking about the need of the American people to be able to afford the medicine their doctors prescribe. A life-saving drug does nobody any good if the patient cannot afford that product, and that is happening far too often in our country. Last year, this is really quite unbelievable. Last year, nearly 1 out of every 5 Americans between the ages of 19 and 64, that's 35 million people, did not get their prescriptions filled because they did not have enough money. They couldn't afford it. And I remember talking to doctors in working class areas in Vermont, and they say, we're writing out prescriptions, and about a quarter of the people they write it for can't fill the prescriptions. What sense is that? In other words, people all over this country walk into a doctor's office because they are sick. They pay for their visit. The doctor spends time diagnosing their problems, and then the doctor writes out a prescription to treat the illness, but 20% of our people are unable to afford the medicine they need that the doctor has just prescribed. And what happens if somebody is sick and doesn't get the medicine they need? Well, obviously, they will get sicker, and in some cases, they will die. This is an unacceptable situation that we have to address. I should tell you that all over this country, people have contacted my office. We have close to 1,000 people who have written to us about the impact of the high cost of prescription drugs on their lives. I'll just read one, and there are many. This is from a person in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, who writes, Advair, the asthma medicine I need, with my insurance was a couple of $100. And when I didn't have insurance, it was over $300. I am a part-time teacher that didn't get insurance through work and doesn't get paid during the summer. Before I could afford to start up insurance again, I had a major asthma attack, and I honestly thought I was going to die on the sidewalk. So that's what's happening to people all over this country who simply cannot afford the medicine they desperately need. The American people should not have to go without the medication they need because Congress does not have the courage to stand up to one of the most powerful lobbying operations here on Capitol Hill, and that is the pharmaceutical industry. The time has come to say very loudly and clearly that enough is enough. The greed of the pharmaceutical industry is killing Americans and making many of them much sicker than they otherwise would have been. It has got to stop. It is unacceptable that while millions of Americans cannot afford the prescription drugs they need, the top 3 pharmaceutical companies made a combined $45 billion in profits last year and spent more on sales and marketing than they did on research and development. It is unacceptable that total spending on medicine in the United States of America has gone up by more than 90% since 2002. It is unacceptable that the monthly cost of cancer drugs has more than doubled over the last 10 years to $9,900 a month. And I think many of you have seen a letter written by oncologists talking about how their patients are unable to purchase the drugs, the cancer drugs that they are prescribing. Instead of listening to the demands of the pharmaceutical industry and their 1,400 lobbyists, an industry which spent over $250 million last year on campaign contributions and lobbying expenses. It is about time for Congress to start listening to the vast majority of the American people who know there's something wrong when we pay by far the highest drug prices in the world. It is time for the United States to join the rest of the industrialized world by implementing prescription drug policies that work for everybody, not just the CEOs of the pharmaceutical industry. And let me just very briefly summarize some of the components of the bill that Congressman Cummings and I will be introducing today. First, the bill requires Medicare to use its bargaining power to negotiate with the prescription drug companies for better prices. This is not a radical idea. It's something that the VA, other government agencies do. When you purchase a lot of product, you use the power, the leverage of that bulk purchasing to force down prices. 2, this bill would allow individuals, pharmacists, and wholesalers to import prescription drugs from licensed Canadian pharmacies where drug prices are 40% lower per person than they are in the United States of America. Back in 1999, I was the first member of Congress to take Americans over the Canadian border. I live 100 miles away from Canada. We border Canada in Vermont. And I will never forget, as long as I live, women who were struggling with breast cancer purchasing a product they needed, a medicine they needed, for 1/10 of the price that they were paying in the United States of America. And I know I got a lot of colleagues out there who believe in free trade. They love free trade. Yet somehow or another, despite their great love for free trade, we have distributors who cannot import medicine from Canada. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Number 3, this bill would hold the pharmaceutical industry accountable when they defraud the American people. Today, nearly every major pharmaceutical company has been convicted of either civil or criminal fraud. 4, this bill would end pay for delay, a practice in which brand name prescription drug companies pay other companies not to manufacture cheaper generic drugs. I'm delighted that the legislation that Congressman Cummings and I are introducing is endorsed by the Alliance for Retiring Americans, Social Security Works, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, Families USA, and many other groups. So we are on to an issue that I believe the American people want resolved, and I'm very proud to be working with Congressman Cummings, and here he is.